Hey everyone, and welcome to my top 10 favourite games released in 2025. Like last year, this is just a wee heads up that this video will be pretty much spoiler free. I'll only be using footage from promotional material or the opening stages of the game in question to try and avoid you getting spoiled. And although I do talk about some things that you could consider gameplay spoilers, there should be no real story spoilers in this video, so hopefully you can watch or listen without worrying about that. Also, the chances are, if I haven't mentioned a game you think should be here, I'm not ignoring it, I probably just haven't played it yet. So anyway, let's get into it. Starting off in 10th place, it's Pokemon Legends ZA. I've never mentioned Pokemon on this channel really, but I'm actually a massive fan of the games. I've played just about every main series and spin-off entry there's been over the years. I've even played competitive singles for over 15 years now. And my love for the series is, to be honest, the main reason this has snuck into the top 10. Although this game does have things going for it, overall I found this to be a step backwards in most senses, especially when compared to Legends Arceus, which is arguably the best Pokemon game of the last decade. In concept, I can understand the desire to expand outside of the confines of turn-based combat, but I think the way that this game handled it, with real-time combat and cooldowns, was a mistake. No Pokemon game is really that hard, but I think this removed almost all of the nuance that we had in the turn-based system. I can acknowledge that's probably because I play competitively, and I like the more strategic elements of the battles, taking your time, but outside of the rogue mega encounters, which were quite engaging, this felt like a button masher, verging on an idle game at points, because there was so little challenge. Between my disappointment about the combat and Lumiose and its wild areas being fairly boring to explore, what positives I could find were in some of the more interesting Pokemon NPCs we've had in a while, and that even now, Mega Evolution is still the best Pokemon gimmick of all time, and it is great to have a game so focused on that. I felt really mixed about this one, but I did still enjoy parts of it, so it's done just enough to make its way in. At 9, it's Power Wash Simulator 2. This is the perfect game for when you've got about one synapse firing per minute, but you still just want to move your thumbs. Load it up, pick some sort of vehicle or building that is caked in a frankly concerning amount of grime, and spray away. The game isn't really about cleaning, though. In my own head, I call games like these Katamari-likes, where the whole premise is just to appease that one part of your brain that gets off on things being cleaned up, or organized, or being sensorially satisfying. This is why, also at number 9, we're chucking in Once Upon a Katamari. Whether you're rolling up unsuspecting Japanese citizens, or blasting a rock climbing wall with a power washer, these games are, at a kind of molecular level, the same experience. They're sharing 9th place because, although I really like both of these games, they are both sequels of sorts that don't realistically do enough to stand out from their predecessors. Fundamentally, outside of a few, frankly inconsequential minor changes, if you've played the first Power Wash, or Katamari Forever or Reroll, then this is just that. Neither of these games do enough to really make the playing experience new, or unique, or interesting, or perhaps even better. But as I said before, more than any game on this list, this is where you go when you're tired, or bored, or stressed. So, although I think these games could have done more to stand out, their value doesn't necessarily lie therein. Sometimes that familiarity can be just what you need. At 8, we've got Ball Pit. This is a game that combines that roguelite formula with both brick breaking and base building, and to ruin our alliterative streak, tower defense. Ball Pit is a really fun and compelling game, with interesting power-ups and a satisfying gameplay loop. But I think where it falls short is in its uneven difficulty scaling and lack of build variety. Because of that, even though you haven't unlocked most of the characters and items by this point, the first few hours you play are likely to be the pinnacle of your experience with this game. When you get your first few evolutions and synergies, and suddenly you're absolutely wrecking everything on screen, it's a great feeling. But when you play for longer, the variety that combat-adjacent roguelites rely on for replayability starts to show a few cracks, and interesting and unique builds start to show really diminishing returns. Perhaps, though, this could be a benefit. If you're after a game with RNG elements that naturally comes to a head after around 20 hours, much less than most of these games do, this is top of the pile. It is very satisfying to play. The building elements can be fun if you're into that sort of thing. There's almost an element of that Katamari-like nature to it as well, if you're looking for something to scratch that lizard brain itch that's slightly more high stakes than the last two games. Overall, very good, but I prefer my games in this genre to have a bit more energy in their legs. Coming in at 7, it's Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. Seldom do you come across a video game title that so aptly describes the basic premise. What was interesting to me about this game was that I felt an almost magnetic pull towards it, and kept finding it really fun, despite the fact that whenever I isolated an element and thought about it, it wasn't actually that great, and worse than it was in Infinite Wealth. The story and characters were a bit cringy, except Majima, obviously. The game was full of reused assets and locations and minigames, a staple of the series, admittedly. And the combat was decent. I prefer the turn-based combat of the last two main series games, but it was overall pretty good. The ship combat, however, was less fun, and a bit of a drag. This makes it seem like the game doesn't have much going for it, but as it happens, I kinda loved it, and as an overall package, I think it's good. You'll know if you're in the mood for it the second you see the musical theatre number they pull off a few hours in. I really wouldn't play this without the context of Infinite Wealth, though. Which, again, I really wouldn't play without the context of Yakuza 7, Like a Dragon. But one thing that could come of playing this game, as happened for me, was that given its shorter length, you might feel like you still want to play more Yakuza after you roll credits. And that is exactly why I finally played Yakuza 0 for the first time, to 100% completion, as soon as I finished the pirate one. Yakuza 0 is brilliant, and honestly, I probably wouldn't have played it this year if not for this game, so it seems to be getting bonus points for that too. So yeah, overall, this is the weakest Yakuza series game I've played yet, pretty comfortably, and somehow, it was still good. At 6, we're going with Lost Records, Bloom and Rage. This game follows the story of 4 teenage girls in rural Michigan and tells 2 concurrent stories. The first takes place in the summer of 1995 and centers around the girls all becoming close friends and their subsequent formation of a Riot Girl-inspired punk band. And the second story takes place in a more present-day setting, where they all reunite for the first time in 27 years. I won't give away anything more than that. Putting gameplay and story to the side for a second, one thing I loved about this game was characterization. All 4 of the girls are kind of annoying, but in a really fantastic, realistic way. There's that thing you get when you're a teenager, which is both the best and worst part about being that age, where everything is so important to you. There's an additional level of intensity to every choice, every moment, every new connection you make. It all feels kind of life or death at the time, and I'm not sure I've ever played anything that has pinned down that exact idea without disparaging it as melodrama, as well as this does. The girls are kind of embarrassing sometimes, their disagreements a bit contrived, their earnestness a bit awkward, but I think that actually they're pretty well written. And it's the juxtaposition you constantly have with their older selves that's the icing on the cake. Not only that, if we're just talking pure vibes, this game is fabulous. Filming on your camcorder in the mid-90s being a core gameplay mechanic is a great building block for that. And with the music, visuals, everything, it all just made me feel a bit wistful, almost a bit sad, which I think was definitely the intention. The algia in nostalgia does mean pain, and that idea bleeds through the game really nicely. This is not a perfect game, by any means. There are some issues with the plot, and characterization for the supporting cast is a bit iffy occasionally. But honestly, I liked this a lot more than I expected to, and it's definitely a game that I've become more fond of the more time has passed since I finished it. Next up, we have Polymines Deluxe. The basic premise is that it blends Minesweeper with nonograms or Picross, Two puzzle formats that I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on. And in combining them, it makes something more compelling and a lot more difficult than most Minesweeper or Picross puzzles that you'll find. There's a lot less to say about this than the other games, because the experience just comes from playing it yourself, really. I don't think there's much merit in me trying to explain why it's fun and engaging. It's best to just pick this up yourself and try it. If you're into brain teasers and puzzles, you'll find this to be an absolute pleasure. I adored this game, and I really hope it gets more traction. Just outside of the top 3, we've got Dynasty Warriors Origins. Outside of a fleeting obsession with Hyrule Warriors nearly a decade ago, this was my first genuine foray into this series and the Musou genre. It's not the kind of game I usually play. I bought it on a real whim at the start of the year, and I was really shocked at how much I adored this game. In terms of gameplay, the average engagement is 90% comprised of mowing your way through legions of enemies, with the odd moment for taking down one particularly strong enemy. I really loved this gameplay synergy, because blitzing through enemy hordes is so satisfying, tickles that part of your brain that I mentioned when talking about Power Wash and Katamari. It feels really good, you don't get sick of it. But then, having to really focus up every couple of minutes, and put into practice the combat that you've been learning passively as you've mopped up the mobs in an often difficult one-on-one showdown, was genuinely riveting. Between map management, figuring out what route is best to take, which of your companions need help the most, whether to prioritize rushing ahead to get rid of enemy commanders and to capture bases, or instead making sure that your troops stay alive for support later in the battle, I just had such a great time. What surprised me most, though, was the story. This game, just like pretty much every entry in this series, weirdly enough, is a retelling of the literary epic The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, itself a retelling of that actual period of Chinese history, in which you ally yourself with one of the three kingdoms, and relive ancient battles and interact with famous historical figures from this time. As someone who doesn't know loads about Chinese history, this was genuinely fascinating, even if dramatized, and I learned a lot, and was really drawn in by the narrative and the interpersonal turmoil. I just thought it was going to be a brainless hack and slash, and I ended up getting one of my favorite combat systems of the last few years, alongside what is basically an insight into one of the greatest soap operas of all time. I played this for around 100 hours before getting the Platinum Trophy, and wouldn't have minded if I'd have had to play it for 200 instead. I couldn't recommend this enough. Okay, into the top 3, and it's Hades 2. This top 3 is arguably the best top 3 games I've ever played in one year. It feels wrong for any of them to not be first, but I have to put one of them at third, and it has to be this one, unfortunately. I loved the first Hades game. I imagine that's a surprise to none of you, because you're probably watching this thanks to my video on it. And as far as I'm concerned, this is an improvement on the original in virtually every sense, which is crazy because that was already a fantastic game. The only thing I found less compelling in the sequel was the romance element that you get into a bit later on, which I found overall more believable in the first. But aside from that very minor personal gripe, this game is an absolute joy to play. It basically just made everything bigger and better. In Hades 1, you take the same route every run, but you have a choice of 2 distinctly different runs in Hades 2, both more interesting than the one in the first game. There are more gods to get boons from, and more NPC encounters in this game than the last one, meaning that every run feels more unique, and there are more opportunities for customization and self-expression. The weapons and combat toolkit are overall more interesting and satisfying than before. The art and music is even more impressive. The upgrade systems and customization options are way deeper and give you a lot more choice in how you choose to play. And you could go on and on. Hades 2 knew exactly where to push on and where to hold back in its continuation from its predecessor. It does virtually everything better, and then gives you twice as much of it as you're expecting. I am currently making a The Mythology Behind Hades 2 video to follow on from that first one, and I've played and recorded 300 hours of this game over the last few months for that. Not once did it feel like a chore. You just feel lucky you're getting to play it. It's a really amazing game. Okay, top 2. This is the least surprising entry on anyone's Game of the Year list for 2025. It's Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This was the game I was most excited for this year, and I really do think it was an absolute triumph. One of the most impressive video game accomplishments in the last decade or so, for sure. My perspective on this is that more than anything, I love JRPGs, and I really love Final Fantasy. So, what I found so amazing about this game was through everything that made this game special, the combat, the characters, the story, the music. It was all remarkably unique and very Clair Obscur, if you will, but I could still strongly feel the impact of the games I grew up loving. This is a game made by a bunch of people who clearly had a pivotal moment as a kid, where they played a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Quest, Legend of Dragoon, or whatever game, which set them on a path to create a game that, above all else, gave other people that kind of moment that they had when they were younger. Like, I remember when 1000 Times Resist came out last year, and the creative director of the game said that despite what everyone else calls the game, what he was actually trying to make was a game that impacted him the same way that Final Fantasy VII did when he was younger. This idea can be extrapolated one for one onto Sandfall and Clair Obscur. I don't think a game has ever done such a good job of wearing its inspirations on its sleeve so openly, while simultaneously making sure that none of its components are even slightly derivative. It really is a masterpiece. It's got a wonderful premise, fantastic voice work and motion capture acting, brilliant pacing, excellent characterization, a deeply moving story, a really great OST, and one of the all-time greatest first hours of any game ever. But most importantly, it's got all of the intangibles that matter. It sounds cheesy, but it has heart, it has soul. The love put into the game drips off every frame, and that's what stands out most. Video games as a medium, and particularly JRPGs in the Final Fantasy series, like I said before, have influenced me and my life more than any other factor I can think of. And hearing Guillaume Proche specifically thank Hironobu Sakaguchi in his Game of the Year acceptance speech felt really validating, because it's exactly what I would have wanted to do in that situation too, and reminded me why Clair Obscur gave me so much joy to play. This game was not only made for people like me, but it will also be the springboard for a whole new generation of people to fall in love with the medium and the genre, and in time we'll have another Game of the Year contender, a few years or decades down the line, where the creator had their first pivotal, life-changing moment in a game in Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It's that good, and it's that important. I genuinely think this is in contention for one of the best games of the last 25 years. But yeah, after being so unashamedly effusive about Clair Obscur, what could beat it to the top spot? After playing it, I was so convinced it would be number one, but then right after completing it, I started another game, and I could not believe my luck that I'd somehow played two of the best games I'd ever played back to back. My number one game of 2025 is the incomparable Blueprints. I went into this knowing nothing more than that it was a puzzle game and it was set in a house. That was it. What ensued for the next 100+ hours was arguably the most memorable gaming experience that I've had in 20 years. I have thought about this game every day since I started playing it. The premise is that you inherit a mansion from your great uncle who recently died, and this mansion has 45 rooms. However, you only secure your inheritance upon finding and entering the hidden room 46. The layout of the house is not fixed, and every day you open doors and draft one of 3 random rooms, all in the hope that over however many days or weeks, you use the clues and information you accrue from all of these rooms and layouts to figure out how you might get into this 46th room. Now, this is a very cool concept for a game, but it's actually a bit misleading, because without spoiling it too much, finding room 46 is just the conclusion to the game's first act, and what follows this is just amazing. Not only is this comfortably the best puzzle game that I've ever played, it also has my favourite storytelling and world building of any non-RPG ever, which is an astounding feat, considering this is a game with no direct dialogue, a game in which you'd never interact face-to-face with another character, a game with only a handful of spoken lines. But wow, when you hear those lines, it is just something else. The way that you build up an understanding of the house you're inheriting, your family history, the socio-political situation of the world Blueprints takes place in, and how that impacts you and has impacted those who came before you. I cannot tell you how moved I was by this game. I was in tears at multiple points throughout, and I'd love to explain why and where, but I can't really tell you without giving away something that you really should experience for yourself. I do think this game is going to hit you harder if you are the kind of person who likes to take your time and loves to read and theorize and take in every bit of information you can find. Like, I had a Google Doc when playing this game, where I would constantly take notes, over 12,000 words of them in total, both regarding overarching puzzles that took tens of hours to solve, but also regarding information about the world and its history, which meant that when I reached moments of narrative conclusion, or when I finally figured out how something came together, it really hit me hard. Blueprints is a difficult and complex game, which can be off-putting in its early stages if you feel like you aren't making tangible progress, but I cannot put into words how worth it is to overcome that challenge and how amazing the payoff feels. In my entire life, I've only ever given a perfect 10 out of 10 score to 2 games. Final Fantasy X, of course, and Xenoblade Chronicles. This is my 3rd ever 10 out of 10. This is, of course, a subjective thing. You might hate this game, but as far as I'm concerned, Blueprints is pretty much as near to perfect as I've ever seen. If you try it out, please persevere with it, because the rewards you get if you really immerse yourself into this world are as good as you'll get from any media, anywhere. I think this game is truly generational, and by the time you finish it, you might find that you have a new favourite colour, the colour blue. That'll make more sense when you play it. But anyway, there we have it. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll try to update you on my health situation. Things aren't that different from this time last year, but I'd made decent, albeit still slow, progress on the Final Fantasy V video over most of 2025. And then Supergiant basically dropped Hades 2 out of nowhere, and that kind of forced a change of plan. Obviously, my most successful video by a distance is the Mythology Behind Hades video, so as I said in the Hades 2 entry, I've prioritized working on that where possible for the last 3 or 4 months, which means that there was no new video this year, because I think I could have probably got the Final Fantasy V one out before the year was up if I hadn't put it on hold for Hades 2. But hopefully, that means that although we got nothing new this year apart from this, there's a good chance for 2 new videos next year, and both of them will be hours and hours long. So fingers crossed, plenty of content to come. Ideally, we'll have the Hades 2 video by the end of the first half of 2026, and the Final Fantasy V video by the end of the second half of the year. I think that's it for updates. Now it's time to shill my Patreon and thank everyone who signed up. As I've mentioned before, it's a bit of a thankless job being a patron considering how inactive I've been recently because of illness. But knowing that, if you're interested in helping me and the channel out, please take a look. It's linked in the description, and of course, as always, I'd like to give a special shout out to my highest tier patrons. Christopher Oliva, Demirose41, Genetic Jen, Humphrey Wallace, Hyungjin Song, Jack Powell, Cantor, Leon, Moganori, Mr. Kef, Nankyoko, Nathan Lamontagne, Nico, Paul De Silva, Sam Nyland, and Wesley Dudley. I am incredibly grateful for your ever-patient support. It means a lot. Thank you again, everyone, for watching all this way, and I hope you all have a lovely new year, and fingers crossed, see you soon for the Mythology Behind Hades 2. Cheers!